Albert, who read extremely concerning comments into the record. It was erased. If the House had wanted to do that, why would that have been? Because nobody knew ahead of time what was happening. If they'd known, I'm sure that nobody in this House would have stood to applaud. I'm certain of that.
Mississauga Malton.
Mr. Speaker, in my riding of Mississauga Malton, I know that people are concerned about crime, and they want to know what our government is doing to make sure that people are safe. This is why I was pleased to see the House unanimously pass Bill C-48 last week, which will help ensure that violent, repeat offenders do not get bail. Can the Minister of Justice tell us more about this progress of this legislation and what the government is doing to improve the safety and community?
You have been listening to debate in the House of Commons as they continue to react there to the controversy that happened last Friday, the incident that has been called deeply painful and embarrassing by MPs. And this was after the House of Commons Speaker Anthony Rota did apologize for inviting and honoring in Parliament a Ukrainian veteran who it turns out was aligned with a Nazi unit during the war. There had been calls for him to step down, and the breaking news today is that this morning Anthony Rota announced he is resigning from his post, his role as Speaker of the House. We will have much more for you on this developing story throughout the day here. You can go to our website anytime, cbc.ca, and you can listen to CBC Radio 1 and watch television news coverage as well. It is 12:14 now, 1:14 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to talk about seniors' care now. And private senior homes have underspent on patients compared to public facilities. That, according to a new report by BC's seniors advocate, Isabel McKenzie. Other findings include that profits from contracted long-term care facilities are rising much faster than what they spend on patients. Isabel McKenzie is joining us in a moment, and we want to hear from you. You can share your thoughts. Does your loved one live in a long-term care facility? Do they need more personal attention? What's been your family's experience with the level of care provided by facilities? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email us as well, bctoday@cbc.ca. I'm joined now by Isabel McKenzie, BC's Seniors Advocate. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. I went through some of the key findings of your report there. Why do you find that contracted care facilities are underspending on patients?
Well, not all contracted facilities. So we contract for about 65% of our beds. So the majority of publicly subsidized long-term care is contracted from the private sector, if you will. But that divides into not-for-profit societies and for-profit companies. And it's a pretty even split. It's a little bit more on the for-profit side, but it's pretty even. So the question is, what are the differences, if any, between the group of facilities that are operated by not-for-profit societies and the group of facilities that are operated by for-profit companies? And when we look at how they're spending their money, there is some very, very distinct differences between the two groups. Most notably, the not-for-profit societies spend about 25% more per bed or per resident on direct care than the for-profit facilities do. The for-profit facilities are spending about 40-some% more on their buildings, on the mortgages, the principal and interest payments on their mortgages than they are in the not-for-profit sector. And then the for-profit sector is spending or accruing about 7 times as much profit as the not-for-profits are. So, then we look at, okay, and how does all of this translate? Every year we look at it, and it's a variation of the numbers, but it's the same theme, which is that the not-for-profit facilities are delivering more care hours than they are funded to deliver, and the for-profit facilities are delivering fewer hours of care than they are funded to deliver, all things being equal. And so it tells us that our funding formula, which doesn't distinguish between whether you're for-profit or not-for-profit, is treating everybody the same. The reality is the for-profit sector is performing differently or behaving differently than the not-for-profit sector. And we need to recognize that in a funding formula so that when you put your loved one in a long-term care home that's publicly subsidized, so the government is, paying for most of the care, it shouldn't matter whether it's operated by a for-profit company or a not-for-profit society. Everything should be the same. And you would see that in how the money is being spent. We're not seeing that now. We need to get to where we will be seeing that. And then we can all have confidence that whether a facility is for-profit or not-for-profit, the care that they're delivering relative to what they're being funded to deliver is the same. And they're being equitably treated. And my hope is we will get to that point.
We're going to speak with Terry Lake, the CEO of the BC Care Providers Association, in a moment, that does represent those for-profit care homes. And he takes issue with the report. He says it's not a complete picture of what's going on. He says it's irresponsible to publish a report when some long-term care homes haven't finalized some of their finance numbers, that they're still recovering from the pandemic. He was speaking to the Vancouver Sun and was quoted there. What is your response to that criticism of your report?
Well, I think Mr. Lake's comments are unfortunate. You could see there some of his members are going to be upset that some of the profit they've been enjoying may not continue into the future if we fix this funding formula. I don't think it's accurate to say it's incomplete data. I'm not sure Mr. Lake is familiar with the financial reporting. So this is going back to the 21-22 year. And remember, we're looking at a bunch of years. Some are COVID, some are not COVID, and the pattern's the same. These are the expenses that the facilities have listed. So I'm unclear when Mr. Lake says, we haven't reconciled everything. Well, the facilities have reported all of their expenses, actually. Their payroll is their payroll, what they've had to pay in staffing costs, what they've had to pay in overtime. All of that is captured in the statements that we have, the statements that have been submitted by the care facilities. I do know that some care facilities are expecting additional revenue, and that I don't.
Ms. McKenzie, are you there? I think we may have lost our connection with Isabel McKenzie, who is BC Seniors Advocate, and her report that's just come out says that for-profit contracted long-term care homes are using up or spending fewer direct care hours with patients when compared with publicly funded care facilities. And as you've been hearing there, she was responding to criticism from Terry Lake, the CEO of the BC Care Providers Association, regarding the numbers that have been used in their assessment for this report. So we'll try to reconnect with Isabel McKenzie in just a moment. Here we do have Terry Lake standing by as well to provide his view of this report and his reaction as well. But we've been asking you what your experience has been with care homes. If you have a loved one there, are you satisfied with the amount of personal attention that your loved one gets at the care home? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669. 3733. And we are getting Isabel McKenzie back just for another question here, but let's go to a caller right now. Laurel is joining us from Duncan. Hi, Laurel. Good afternoon. What's your experience?
Yes, hello. My father was recently diagnosed with dementia, with paranoid and delusional kind of thinking, and he was hospitalized until a bed came available, and he was moved into a care home within this last month. Since he's been there, he's been able to leave the facility twice, even though he's in a secure unit. And we feel like they're doing the very best they can with the limited amount of staff that they have. And it feels like they haven't got anyone who can help him transition and stabilize. Their kind of thinking is that he can stay in his room until he adjusts and then starts to participate more in the community that he's living in now. But if you go back to what I just said, he has dementia with paranoid and delusional thinking. So What he actually needs is a one-to-one that assists him. And when he arrived there, he arrived with one of the psych nurses from the hospital because he wasn't able to manage this transition. So to me, that was a strong indicator that he was going to be exit-seeking and at risk. Yet he has been able to figure out a way to get out of there twice. You know, they've been able to get him back. But, you know, while that was occurring, of course, it was terrifying for our family, wondering where he was and what was happening. He still doesn't have any kind of a, you know, system that stops him from leaving. And we've been asking for something, you know, that would be a bracelet or some sort of thing, and they're looking into it. There are now pictures up in the facility so that people who go through the secured doors, there's, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 doors that he was able to get out of. But the interesting thing is the code is the same that it was when my grandmother was there a decade ago.
Okay, it hasn't been changed. Wow, that must have been frightening for you, Laurel, I'm sure. Now, you mentioned what he needs is one-to-one attention. How much of that is he getting?
Well, I think they're following the rules, whatever those rules are. There are, you know, RCAs. There's a RN that's in charge of everyone. There's an LPN on every unit, you know, on every shift. But there's no one that just is there to help with his psychosocial needs. You know, they have activity workers and they have an activity coordinator, but that's not what I'm talking about. This man has mental health concerns, not just, you know, the need to transition, you know, if you just were in a wheelchair, say, or, you know, he's got particular needs that I just don't see these facilities having the skills or anyone who knows what to do. You know, they're
Laurel,
just kind of shocked.
thank you very much for your call, and I appreciate you sharing your experience with us. And I know that must have been quite frightening for you to have heard that your father had been able to leave the care home. One final word from Isabel McKenzie. So what's needed to make things better then? You talked about a different funding formula, but it sounds like there are things like, you know, what she's talking about, training, more focus on mental health.
Well, I think we need to make sure that we have the appropriate staff, both in terms of the skills and the training and the numbers that we need. And we need to make sure that the money we are providing to these facilities to hire and train that staff is being used for that purpose. And if it's not, the money has to come back. And that's a missing element, I think, we have in our funding formula today. We can change this. It will make it more equitable throughout all of our contracted sites, but it's going to be difficult work because it's not equitable now. 80% of the profit is concentrated in 20% of our facilities. And so if we're sort of evening things out a bit, we can see where there's going to be some facilities that are going to be challenged with this new funding model, but others are going to embrace it.
Ms. McKenzie, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate speaking with you this afternoon. Isabel,
my pleasure. Thank you.
You take care. Isabel McKenzie is BC's seniors advocate. And for more on this report now and his reaction, we're joined by Terry Lake, the CEO of the BC Care Providers Association. They represent not-for-profit and for-profit operators of seniors living and wellness services in BC. And again, we're taking your calls. You can share your thoughts. Does your loved one live in a long-term care home, and do they need more personal attention? What kind of attention, as we just heard from our caller there? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. And Terry Lake joins me now by phone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Michelle, and I promise I had nothing to do with cutting Isabel off.
No, a lot of technical difficulties do take place here. We don't know. There might be some gremlins in the wiring. That's what I blame it on. So tell me what your reaction is. The conclusion by Isabel McKenzie is there's this pattern of under-delivery by the for-profit care homes. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, when Ms. McKenzie says, I may not understand how it works, I was health minister for 4 years and, in fact, hired Ms. McKenzie. I've been 3 years with the BC Care Providers. So I can assure her and you that I do understand how it works. And first of all, I think we have to acknowledge that there is not a funding formula here in British Columbia. Every contracted provider, whether they're for-profit, has a different type of contract with the health authority. Some are a result of requests for proposals. Others are, one-off contracts that are extended over time. But we do agree on a couple of things. Number one, we need to have a proper funding formula that has the principles of equity, quality, transparency, and above all, sustainability, which is very important because we've seen some not-for-profit operations have to be taken over by health authorities because the current system isn't supporting them enough. So, talking about for-profits doing well and not-for-profits not as well, that can be a problem if operators are not doing well, because if they fall out of the system, our entire healthcare system will be in big trouble. And the profit in this sector, as Ms. McKenzie has acknowledged in her report, is 4%. It's not outrageous. But the biggest problem we have with the report, Michelle, is that it focuses on a year 21-22 in the middle of COVID. And I can tell you, and I've explained to her, that year has not been closed out yet financially. So some operators received actually more money than they needed for that year. And through this reconciliation process, that money will be returned to the system and allocated to the extraordinary costs in the following year of 22-23.
Okay.
So it is incomplete, and I think we have to wait. This kind of report is useful. But let's wait until we have the new tool that's being developed by the ministry to monitor finances in all government-owned and operated, not-for-profit and for-profit homes. And then we can do a proper analysis.
Okay. And what listeners or people who have loved ones in care homes, what they may be perhaps more interested in is the actual care that residents are receiving. Mm-hmm. And so you're talking about finances there, but this report found that not-for-profit facilities spent 25% more on direct care of their residents and 27% more on indirect care than those for-profits. So how do you explain that gap in the care that residents are receiving?
Well, again, that information is tied to the financial reporting system, and that we have all acknowledged needs to be improved. So, again, drawing conclusions from data that is incomplete or questionable.
So you're saying that gap isn't actually there, or is not as wide as she says?
We don't know, Michelle. That's what I'm saying is we don't have the proper data to identify what that gap is. And when I talk to ministry officials, they have that same that same question: is how do we identify that gap? With this new long-term care monitoring tool that is being developed, we will be able to identify that properly. I can say this though, that during the COVID pandemic, many operators were very short-staffed, and so they could not safely keep all their beds open, which reduced the number of hours of care that they, in fact, could provide. And some of that just is related to the acute challenges we have with health human resources. But some of it is due to incentives offered by health authorities, for example, to provide incentives for working short shifts, signing bonuses, and it actually drew staff away from contracted providers and made the situation worse. So not to point fingers, because everyone was doing their best to look after vulnerable British Columbians, but it points to the need for a new system, and we're at the table with the government and completely dedicated and committed to creating that system, which does provide equity, transparency, and above all, quality and sustainability.
Looking forward to the future, there is going to be even more of a need for care homes and these facilities. So is this the answer then, this new system and monitoring system that you're talking about? What can take us into the future with equitable, valuable care?
Well, it's part of the solution, but we've got to get busy building new care homes. It used to be that we had 75 long-term care spaces per 1,000 population. We're down, and that's publicly subsidized spaces. We're down to about 50 to 55. So this report outlines a 138% increase in wait lists, a 35% decrease in the capacity versus the population need. So we have to build new care homes. And of course, You can do that in different ways. You can do that with health authority and government owned and operated, and some of those have been announced. They're coming in at over $1 million a bed, which is hugely expensive. Or you can go to an RFP process with the not-for-profits and for-profit sector. And in order to do that, we have to have a funding formula that makes sense in order for people to step up and say, I'm willing to get into this sector, I'm willing to expand into this sector to meet the needs of a rapidly aging population.
Really appreciate your joining us this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thanks
for
so
your
much,
time.
Michelle.
Take care.
Thank you.
Terry Lake is the CEO of the BC Care Providers Association. It's 12:32, 1:32 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC. Coming up in our next half hour, we are asking what skills do we need to make it in tech jobs? That's right, they're changing massively, thanks in no small part to artificial intelligence. So we're going to ask you how you can survive and thrive in that industry. That's coming up after the CBC News Update with Belle Puri.
Good afternoon. 2 people are dead and 4 others are injured after a helicopter crash east of Prince George. RCMP say the crash happened near the Purdon Hill ski area along Highway 16 just before 8 o'clock this morning. 6 people were on board the Bell 206L helicopter. BC Ferry says problems with its debit and credit card payment systems at some of its ferry terminals have been resolved. The corporation says a number of terminals started coming back online just before 9 o'clock. Around 6 this morning, travelers were reporting that point-of-sale transactions were down at the Tsawwassen Ferry Terminal. The ferry service confirmed the outages were being felt across its entire system. Everything now has been fixed. The BC Wildfire Services crews are now working to patrol the edge of the 139 square kilometre McDougall Creek fire. They're also working to put out any remaining hotspots. Communities near the blaze can expect to see smoke within the perimeter for the coming weeks. A look at the BC weather on the north coast, a rainy afternoon. In the Peace region, sunny with some local smoke, a high of 17. Central interior, mainly cloudy. The temperature will be steady at about 15 degrees. In the southeast and southern interior, cloudy with a 60% chance of showers. You might get some thunder as well, a high of 18. Kamloops, South Thompson, a mix of sun and cloud, a high of 20. And along the south coast, Metro Vancouver, Victoria, Fraser Valley, showers and the risk of some thunder late this afternoon. The temperature will be steady near 16. Now back to Michelle Eliot and more of BC Today.
Belle, thank you very much. That's Belle Puri in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back. You're with BC Today here on CBC Radio 1, live streaming on CBC Gem. You can use that app, or you can follow us on YouTube as well. Just search CBC Vancouver. Our main website has us as well. That's cbc.ca/BC. And we do have a report further on what you heard there in Belle Puri's news update. The Transportation Safety Board is now confirming that 2 people are dead following a helicopter crash this morning. It happened 55 kilometers east of Prince George near the Purdon Hill ski area. And RCMP say they were first notified at about 7:45 this morning Pacific time. For the latest on this, we are joined by CBC News reporter Kate Partridge from Prince George. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Michelle.
Thank you so much for joining us. And what do we know about those reported fatalities and how the other passengers are doing?
Yeah, as you mentioned, we do know that 2 people have died. There were 6 people on board that helicopter. The remaining 4 we hear have been transported to the hospital here in Prince George. We don't know exactly the nature of their injuries, but the Transportation Safety Board has said they've heard from local responders that the remaining 4 sustained just minor injuries.
Now, I know that you drove over to the site this morning. Where exactly did this happen? And can you describe the area for us?
Sure. So the Purdon Ski Hill is about an hour east of Prince George along Highway 16. When I went out there, there was quite a lot of activity happening nearby. People were staging, emergency response was staging at the nearby Purdon Lake Resort. So that's just on the western side of the Purdon Lake Ski Hill. As I mentioned, lots of activities. So there were 4 fire trucks from various agencies across the kind of Prince George region, some of the smaller detachments as well. The coroner arrived at about 10:30 while I was there and liaised with search and rescue. There was about 6 to 12 search and rescue, kind of prepping to head out into the forest. It is quite a remote part. There's a lot of outdoor recreation in the area,
Hmm.
but not much in the way of buildings. So it is quite dense, and RCMP did say that that posed some issues
Hmm.
with assessing the scene in those early moments.
And in speaking with RCMP, do they know any details as to what happened?
They haven't been able to share too much more. We have heard they haven't released names, but we have heard that the people involved in the crash are locals to Prince George. The helicopter was flying was privately owned and was flying chartered flights in the area. Beyond that, we don't have much more information. Transportation Safety Board is en route, they say,
Hmm.
to conduct the investigation that will happen in parallel alongside that investigation by the coroner service.
Okay, Kate, thank you so much for this. Really appreciate it. We'll continue to follow it throughout the day here, of course. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Michelle.
That is CBC reporter Kate Partridge reporting live for us in Prince George.
You too.
It's 12:37 now, 1:37 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thanks so much for being with us. And now we're going to talk about the effect of artificial intelligence on technology jobs and what technology jobs look like in the future. And sometimes it seems that the younger generation certainly is catching on. You might have heard the story a little while ago about a 13-year-old from White Rock who actually developed a video game, and it's going to be released on PlayStation. Maximum Trust created an action-adventure game called Astrolander, and yes, next fall it will be released on PlayStation 5. And he said he first learned how to code at 6 years old. Well, tech and digital skills are being acquired at a younger age these days, it seems, and the future in tech may seem bright. It's also an industry, though, that's undergoing massive change, thanks in no small part to AI. And we're asking you, how has your own job related to technology changed? How is AI changing your own line of work? And what skills do you think are important to make it, given rapid developments in technology? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. You can reach us by email as well. That's bctoday@cbc.ca. My guest is Donna Turner, Associate Dean of Computing and Technology Professional Programs at BCIT. Good afternoon.
Hi, Michelle.
Thanks so much for joining us. First of all, what did you think of the story about the 13-year-old who was interested in gaming and had developed this game that's now going to be released on PlayStation 5?
I loved the story. I mean, the talent and the passion and the motivation to be able to learn this and do this on your own and at home. I thought it was a fantastic story and one that is completely believable, I think. I mean, there's so many resources out there for young people to learn. I mean, so many free tutorials and tools that they can use. All they need really is the motivation and a little bit of dedication. I think it was fantastic, and it just, I think, draws people more to computing and technology.
Yeah, I can imagine. And yes, it does seem more believable. Here he is, a 13-year-old in White Rock having made this game, and suddenly it's now going to be launched on PlayStation 5. When it comes to youth, how much more in tune are they with technology?
I think they're very in tune, and it's from exposure. It's not. I don't think it's the fact that their minds are younger. I think it was the fact that they were just exposed to all these things at such an early age that it just became more ingrained and more normal, rather than something that you've never seen before that you then have to learn.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's a great advantage for youth to be exposed to technology so early. Because then if they want to go into a technology job, it just makes it that much easier for them.
Right. We've just been showing some video games on our live stream here. I saw Super Mario in there. It was such a novelty when I started playing it back in the 80s. Now it's just, so much more modern and developed for sure. But it's just a way of life, it seems, for young folks. But what about AI? How are things changing when it comes to jobs in technology? What should people keep in mind?
Well, so far, people are just trying to wrap their heads around AI.
Yeah.
So far in industry, we haven't seen much change. We have we meet with industry once or twice every academic year, and we get their input for all of our programs. And we've asked them these questions, like how has it changed your workforce or your company procedures so far? And so far, they are all just in the same place as us, just trying to figure it out, trying to determine, how can we use this to our advantage? We want to use, just like any tool, like just like a calculator, we want to use it to our advantage to make our jobs easier and more efficient. But a lot of the companies what they're trying to do actually is determine what skills that they are lacking in their current workforce to take most advantage of all of these AI tools that are coming out. We definitely want AI. We believe AI will assist us with our technology jobs, and just make it easier, like just as with any tool that comes out. Suddenly we can be faster, and then we can do things that are the most interesting to us rather than kind of the monotonous, tedious tasks that AI can now take over for us.
Yes, and I'm going to ask you more about what skills you think people do need, to build as we face new frontiers in artificial technology. My guest is Donna Turner, Associate Dean of Computing and Technology Professional Programs at BCIT. We're asking you, when it comes to technology, if you have a tech job, how has your own job changed? How is artificial intelligence affecting it? And what skills do you think are important in order to make it, to survive and thrive in when working with technology? If you had the ear of young people, someone who is like the 13-year-old from White Rock, what advice would you give to them to prepare for the future? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 as well on your cell phone, or you can email us bctoday@cbc.ca. And so when you look at someone, Donna, like that 13-year-old, who obviously has the technical skills, what are the things that perhaps people aren't thinking about that they need to develop or acquire to really prepare themselves for the future?
Yeah, I thought about that when I heard the story. I thought this teenager obviously has the talent, but I would love to look at the code, because
The code
one thing I
itself.
thought about, yeah, the code itself, the kind of like the foundation of the game programming and how that's developed. Because although that part may sound like the boring part, the foundation, but if you don't have that and you don't know some of the theories or the best practices behind, say, programming a game, you could have an excellent game, but one that is perhaps not scalable. For example, if this game becomes super popular, could it handle millions of users at one time? Is the code developed in such a way that it would be easily scalable to add new levels or new characters, or would that be difficult because of the way the architecture of the program was developed initially? So what I think is, some of our programs, the formal part, the best practices and laying the foundation, that's a really important part of any technology job. And that's something, I would love that 13-year-old to come to BCIT and for us to be
You're recruiting him already. Yeah.
I'm sure I would love to examine what he knows already, which I'm sure is a lot, and then just build it up. That's what we would love to do.
Right. And what about those kinds of soft skills, adaptability or social skills and that kind of thing? What do you think is missing?
I would say, kind of tying in the programming game story to the AI part of it. People will ask me if I am worried about the future of tech, for example, because AI is coming up.
Right.
And this is my personal opinion, but I am not worried, because I know that all the things that we teach are so much more than what AI can do. Like teamwork and communication, being able to work with someone else, working with a large or a small team. The problem solving and the analytical thinking, those are all human core competencies that I don't think can ever be replaced. AI can do some of the, like I said, the behind the scenes, and allow humans to continue with our problem solving and our creative thinking and applying our learning to real world problems.
Right. But those are those things that can't be replicated by by machine learning, by AI?
I don't think, well, based on what I know, I mean, for example, if we're talking about Chat GPT, it's more of a pattern-based
Right.
regurgitation of knowledge. It's not really problem solving. I mean, it can debug small pieces of code, but if you were to give it a certain list of requirements, and we had our students do this. We required them in a recent project to try to use AI, and they ran into a lot of frustrations. For example, they
Really?
an app that involved dragons, and they said AI took it much too literally, and suddenly everything was dragons. So we're teaching our students how to use it, and also how to refine the queries to get what you need. It's a skill. It's not what AI will initially give you is usually not what you were actually looking for.
Right.
It needs refinement, and it needs the human factor to be able to figure out what has been provided to me, this kind of spewing of knowledge versus which parts do I actually need and can apply to solve this very particular problem.
Okay, actually scour through for what's valuable. How has it changed what you teach then? I mean, it sounds like you're incorporating projects to learn, how to best use them and come up with best practices. But how has it changed what you teach in the classroom?
So far, we have incorporated it to be more like, how can it help us? The core competencies and the knowledge that we're teaching have not changed at all. We are still, we definitely see the need in industry and beyond for certain things to be taught. So that's not changing. Where we see it being a helpmate, it does help students learn in different ways. So if they're not understanding something that's being described in a certain way by one of our faculty members, they may ask AI to describe it in a different way.
Right.
So it's been helpful for learning. It's been helpful for finding small problems, and kind of speeding up some of the process. But in terms of what we're teaching the exact same things because we find that that's what the students need to learn.
Yeah, I'd love to ask you as well, just in terms of what kinds of jobs people can be thinking about. We'll talk about that in a moment. My guest, Donna Turner, Associate Dean of Computing and Technology Professional Programs at BCIT. And we are discussing tech jobs, the tech industry, and jobs related to technology, asking you, what are the skills you think that we need to make it, especially as we head into a future with increasing use of AI? You can give us a call as well if let us know how it's changing your own job right now and what you're doing to adapt. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, you can reach us, bctoday@cbc.ca. Love to hear from you. Tanya is joining us from Kamloops. Hi, Tanya.
Hi, good afternoon. Hello.
Thanks so much for calling in. I understand you work in the trades.
Yes, that's correct. I'm a hands-on professional. Yes. So no, not much technology in my business.
Right. Okay. So what is your encounter and interaction with AI, or what are your thoughts on the impact that it's having?
Yeah, so my encounters would certainly be more privately. I think like a lay person, when you're listening to music and you get some type of AI machine telling you what you're supposed to be liking and this type of thing. But my concern is more with the comment that the lady made that AI is going to free us up from mundane tasks so we can be more involved in creative work. That may be true, but I think I just really wouldn't want to leave out of the whole picture that the way these machines are being built and trained to react properly to inputs, these data sets are being tested, and people in very other low-income nations are taking on jobs that are doing very disgustingly repetitive tasks to try to get these machines working properly. So this mundane task idea is actually happening in a great volume for people that are just trying to get jobs in other countries. And they've taken on these obviously unwillingly, but just to say, there's still a lot of mundane stuff going on that really sounds very unsatisfactory just so that we can have some type of convenience in our workplace. I find that we can't leave that out of the equation when these things are being developed.
Is it equitable in the benefits?
Exactly. And I don't envy any of these people that are trying to work at very, very low wages to try to make some money, but they're feeding that monster.
Yeah. What a thoughtful comment. Thank you so much for that, Tanya. And so do you ever see a world in which the trades will somehow be impacted? As you say, it's very hands-on, but is there a role in the future, do you think, for AI? And the pros and cons of that, of course, can be debated, but what are your thoughts? Is that at all a discussion in your industry? Tanya?
Industry?
Yes.
No.
No. Okay.
No. I don't think so. Honestly, there's no way around other than the hands-on.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Right? A hairdresser will never put a head into a robot and it'll come out.
That's right. That would be a movie, I think. A scary one at that. Tanya, great to hear from you. Thanks so much for the call.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you take care.
Bye.
That's a really good point, Donna. The equitable benefits coming from AI, as you've been talking about, how we can use it to focus more on tasks that we find fulfilling, but to what extent does that mean other people are not benefiting?
Yeah, I'm not exactly, she didn't get into detail about which tasks that she was describing about in other countries that aren't as financially sound.
Right. It looks like to build more AI or to work on the sort of fine details of AI.
Yeah, I think from what I know of AI, I mean, and a generative AI is only as good as the data that backs it up, but it learns as it goes, or rather, it collects data as it goes. So the more that people are asking questions, the more information that it has, right? And to my knowledge, that just happens very organically with use. It's not specifically something that I know of that's being delegated to certain kind of classes of workers. Yeah.
I wonder, though, I take her point that, pardon me, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say there was an interesting example where a certain version of AI was given a certain data set, which was cut off, say in 2021. But just through the questions that had been asked by all the users, the AI became aware of a different world event that had happened post the data set cutoff because of all the people using and asking questions and saying what's happening in this country. Then it began to answer those questions, but it was only as good as the data that the users had put in. Not always correct, right?
I wonder if her question leads to a bigger one about ethics in technology. I mean, is that something that you come against? I know you're in the technology program, and I don't know how much of the discussion is focused on that, but kind of the ethical questions when it comes to the technology sector and how those jobs are divided amongst nations.
Yeah, ethics in computing and technology. It's always been something to be discussed and to be. We have courses on ethics in IT and computing as well. Not just to make people aware or make our students aware of all of the topics that could potentially come up. If you were hired, you're working for an employer, and you don't know the answer or the solution to a task that you've been given, but you find it on the internet. Well, can you use that and call it your own, right? And companies all have they'll have their own kind of internal policies and procedures, right? And when it comes to AI, I already know of one company that's trying to formulate internal company guidelines of how to use it and what's acceptable or not. And I know that one thing that they've already put on their list is don't put our production code, don't feed that into AI because then it becomes fully public knowledge. So in industry, the ethics and how to work properly with AI, it's definitely being discussed and things are being developed right now, but it's just very early stages. I mean, a year ago, we weren't even talking about any of this. Right?
Yeah. And now we are constantly talking about all of it.
Yes. Now it's all we talk about.
Eric sent us this email. More and more generative AI is becoming more and more mainstream. As a software developer, I truly believe that people who use AI will replace those who don't use it. I'm definitely still exploring and passing on what I've found and what works for me and what doesn't to the rest of my team. I really like the mindset that AI is a tool and I can learn how to use it to help me be better or be more efficient. I've seen some of my colleagues see ChatGPT as an authoritative figure, when in reality, my colleagues are often that authoritative figure. What a thoughtful comment. Thank you very much, Erica, for that. And so he's saying that people who use AI will replace those who don't use it. Donna, what advice do you have for someone who's, looking for a career, perhaps looking to the future, or just looking to make sure that they upgrade their skills or maintain their skills for their current job? What's your general advice?
Well, I agree with Eric, and my general advice is that I think the skill of being able to use AI is definitely going to be one that's in demand. Right? So just like if you were going to learn a programming language, you may try to figure out, well, which one is the most popular right now, because that's the one that will give me the best chance of employment. Right? So being able to use AI is another skill that would increase chances of employment. Definitely. If you could say, I can speed up my output by 20% because I can effectively use AI tools to help me, then what employer would say no to that, right? So it's a skill. I see it as a beneficial skill. It's one that we're already incorporating into our project courses.
Okay.
And I think it will be very valuable. Yeah.
Be open to it. Is what you're saying. Donna, thank you very much for your perspective and your advice this afternoon. Good to speak with you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Donna Turner is Associate Dean of Computing and Technology Professional Programs at BCIT. That's it for our show today. My thanks to everyone who called in. And of course, you can follow up on the top story of the day. That's Anthony Rota resigning as Speaker of the House, and much more on that throughout the day here on CBC. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. You can watch us again on CBC Vancouver on YouTube. Have a great afternoon.